Dear viewers, a warm welcome. Welcome to the start of the first special edition of the show Behind the Scenes as part of the summer programming schedule on KOO 13 television. My guest is the founder of the Business Excellence Group, a consultant to numerous multinational companies, and a representative of the Scandinavian company Zinzino, within which he is working on a very significant health project. And last but not least, he was socially engaged in the 1990s, a member of the Otpor movement, and to this day continues to fight for a better and fairer society in Serbia. My name is Ivan Milanović, and my esteemed guest is Mr. Saša Ljuboja. Saša, welcome to the show Behind the Scenes, and thank you very much for taking the time to be my guest.
Glad to be here. First of all, thank you for inviting me, and I also want to greet and thank our esteemed viewers for following this distinguished program.
That's right. So, for the viewers, we've known each other for a long time, so we'll use informal speech. That is, if you agree as well.
Of course.
As I mentioned, you are working on a very important healthcare project. To start off, I'd like to ask you a bit more about that. That's right.
This project is of the utmost importance and critical value, and it has been clearly shown that the research we conducted is exceptionally significant and highly impactful, considering that the complex issue of chronic inflammation or chronic inflammatory processes has been extensively researched and analyzed across the globe for more than 40 years now. What is problematic about chronic inflammatory processes? It's that they are responsible for causing, let's say, virtually all cardiovascular diseases, all neurological diseases, and numerous other health complications that one can certainly live with, but undoubtedly with much more difficulty and greatly reduced functionality. Chronic inflammation itself cannot be detected if we merely glance at the standard results of laboratory tests that we can do. So we go and get a comprehensive blood panel analysis, do biochemistry, and check all the specific inflammatory markers. We see that the sedimentation rate is fine, the white blood cell count is normal, CRP is normal, the complete blood count is normal, D-dimer, interleukin, and all other parameters are perfectly normal. Then, a month later, we go for a routine checkup, and it often happens that doctors say, we have a very serious and urgent medical problem, immediate hospitalization is necessary, or surgical intervention is required. How is that possible if we've had a full medical checkup and everything came out fine? The very causes of such issues are chronic inflammatory processes that occur at the cellular level and directly lead to certain problems. Of course, this depends on lifestyle, genetics, the specific dietary choices we make, the environmental climate we inhabit, and our daily stress levels. These problems will affect some people's hearts. For others, they'll manifest through the nervous system. Some will develop certain issues with bones, joints, or muscles. But one thing is certain, some form of health complication will definitely arise. To try to explain what's happening there in a more concrete way, let's break it down to the cellular level. Imagine that this represents a single cell. Chronic inflammation occurs when the cell membrane becomes excessively hard and far too rigid. Essentially, this implies that of everything we inhale, drink, or eat, including all the essential nutrients that our bodies require, only a significantly smaller fraction actually enters the cell. Along with all the healthy things we take in, various harmful toxins and heavy metals also manage to enter our systems. And they also enter in smaller amounts than they normally would, just as fewer nutrients are absorbed. But the other part of the problem, which may be even more significant, is that these toxins and heavy metals cannot be eliminated. And then, over time, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, with a reduced intake of nutrients and the accumulation of these toxins and heavy metals, this leads to the manifestation and problems we've been talking about. We can go through the process of detoxification, but we still have a problem if the cell membrane becomes too hard and too rigid. Why does this happen? Well, the primary underlying causes, or rather the main components, the absolutely essential building blocks of the cell membrane that affect its permeability, are fatty acids. Specifically, these consist of omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. Omega-6 fatty acids harden the cell membrane. That means they are inherently pro-inflammatory, they significantly intensify inflammatory processes, and in the past, we used to find them primarily in refined vegetable oils, potatoes and starchy vegetables, bread and various grains. However, over the last 80 years or so since the end of World War II, there has been a major shift toward highly manufactured and ultra-processed foods different ways of feeding animals and giving livestock various concentrates. Also, the widespread spraying of plants and the use of different pesticides, herbicides, and other substances containing harmful toxins began. The direct consequence of these negative changes is the fact that today, even animal-based foods, including milk and dairy products, meat and processed meats, contain a surprisingly large amount of omega-6 fatty acids. Essentially, this means that here in the Balkans and in Serbia, virtually everything we consume today at every single meal contains a significantly high concentration of omega-6 fatty acids, and it is widely assumed that the total amount of omega-6 in our bodies in this region is considerably more elevated than it should be. On the other hand, omega-3 fatty acids create a counter process. They help to soften the cell membrane, increase its permeability, and we simply do not get enough of them in our diet. Our natural DNA is such that omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids should be in balance at a ratio of 1.1. If we had much more omega-3 compared to omega-6, then the cell would be far too porous and unstable. And then we would have a situation like what happens with hemophiliacs, where blood vessels spontaneously rupture just from touching them and everything falls apart, no? Or like when we were kids watching Tom and Jerry and they just simply dissolve and melt away. That's essentially a rough idea of what could happen, but it doesn't actually happen. There is a significant dietary issue in the world today, which is that we have much more omega-6 fatty acids than omega-3. Many scientists began working on this more than 40 years ago. The Italians conducted serious research primarily on autistic children about 30 years ago, and then the Scandinavian countries carried out the most extensive part of the research. And when they carefully analyzed and measured these specific ratios, they discovered the remarkable fact that the average ratio across the various Scandinavian countries, including nations such as Denmark, Iceland, Norway, Finland, or Sweden, remained remarkably consistent, falling somewhere in the range of 10 to 12 to 1 when comparing omega-6 to omega-3. That means there is much more omega-6 than omega-3, whereas naturally we should be balanced at about 1 to 1, and in Japan it's somewhere around 9 to 1. So let's say in those healthiest countries with the most natural sources of omega-3 fatty acids, which they naturally have in their environment and food, and where there is also a culture of using supplements, and everyone uses omega-3s through supplementation as well, in those countries the ratio is somewhere around 10 to 12 to 1. At that time, two types of research were conducted. One was to determine whether the organism can adapt and to what extent. Since we have been adapting to a wide variety of environmental changes on the planet for millions, or rather thousands of years, our bodies can undoubtedly adjust and adapt now as well, but they simply cannot adapt without limits. And the scientific research has clearly demonstrated that the body can adapt, but only up to a specific ratio of 4 to 1. 4 to 1 is the limit. Anything less is fine. So we don't need an omega-6 to omega-3 ratio of exactly 1 to 1. 3 to 1 also works. With a ratio higher than 4 to 1, the body cannot adapt, which means there is a chronic inflammatory process. And in Scandinavian countries, Japan, we have a situation where the average ratio is 9, 10, 11, or even 12 to 1. And of course, they declared this to be the most significant and pressing challenge for their public health, especially since certain diseases started to emerge and manifest that they hadn't encountered before. Even today in the developed world, even at the level of the World Health Organization, irrespective of any personal opinions we might hold regarding its role, it is generally accepted that the most important thing for public health is to regulate chronic inflammatory processes and to try to bring the body into balance. That is why, in various countries at the state level, there are extensive campaigns by ministries of health and other health-related institutions emphasizing the absolute necessity of achieving balance, reducing those ratios to 3 to 1, and they devote an extraordinary amount of focus and resources to this. That research was later further expanded and applied to a variety of different countries. We can say that in the European Union, the average ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 is somewhere around 15 to 1. In the United States, the typical dietary ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 is 22 to 23 to 1. These are the same Americans we frequently mock and criticize, saying they are deformed, that they eat junk food, dine at fast food restaurants, that they are all struggling with being overweight, and so on. However, they are not the worst in the world. The worst results up until around 2020 were clearly demonstrated by India in the research studies. There the ratio was 39 to 1. And there are a wide variety of logical and significant reasons for this: the presence of extremely heavy industrial sectors and severe pollution. If we look at the list of the most polluted cities and places on the entire planet, India is frequently found right at the top of those rankings. Then there is the issue of overpopulation and widespread poverty. They feed people there with genetically modified food simply so that the population can manage to survive. Almost 60 years ago, the fifth blood group was discovered there, so it was somewhat expected that the results could turn out that way. Back in 2020, we first started to conduct our specialized research right here. Of course, this was during the official registration and certification process, because in Serbia we still don't have a laboratory that can measure all fatty acids. Currently, there are only 4 laboratories in all of Europe that are seriously engaged in this work. One is located in Great Britain, and that's only recently. The second is in Italy, the third in Germany, and the fourth is in Norway. So it was not to be expected that much attention would be paid to this here, since it really wasn't so simple to get these complex blood analyses done. Of course, in the meantime, all of this has been made easier with the use of new techniques and methods for blood analysis. As science advances, it makes certain things easier for us. This has enabled a large number of studies and tests to be conducted here as well. When we talk about the number of samples here, it is now over 1,700,000 samples from all over the world. When we talk about these Scandinavian countries, that's several 100,000 people who have been measured. When we started conducting research in Serbia, we were limited by the number of people we could measure. We didn't want to waste time, so we chose to include around 500 people who are, let's say, the healthiest in our region. Why the healthiest? Well, because there was a feeling that maybe the results wouldn't be all that great. So if we get results that are somewhere around the European average, then this sample of 500 doesn't mean much, because the average needs to be reflected among ordinary people as well. But if the results turn out bad, then they are very representative, because the average can only get worse. What is the criterion for the healthiest people? Well, it's those people who have nothing to change in their diet because they eat optimally and are very knowledgeable in that area. They have nothing to change in their physical activity because they are either recreationally or professionally involved in sports. And all of them have been using supplements for many years. Among other things, they have been taking omega-3 supplements for a long period, which is the most important one here. In that group of people are members of the Serbian Olympic team, professional athletes, and doctors from the Olympic committees both in Serbia and in Macedonia. We conducted this research in Serbia and in Macedonia. Highly qualified nutrition specialists, subspecialists in nutrition, and cardiologists. Many of these professionals have completed doctorates and authored comprehensive books related to omega-3 fatty acids. Nutritionists, then Nutritionist of the Year, Fitness Personality of the Year, Fitness Trainer of the Year, Influencer of the Year. In other words, those people who truly have nothing to change in their diet and where you can get a real result. Unfortunately, at that time, the only places on the planet that had an average worse ratio than 40:1 were Serbia and Macedonia. So in that group of the healthiest people, we had an average between 42.1 and 43.1. Up until this very moment, we have taken many thousands of different samples and conducted extensive comprehensive tests in these specific areas within Serbia and Macedonia, working directly with average people. We have already clearly found that in Macedonia the ratio is 50:1, and in Serbia it is certainly getting very close to that same level. This ultimately means that here, by far, we have the absolute worst average found anywhere on the entire planet. And it's not like we're just among the worst, like sometimes we're bad, sometimes we're not. No, our average is 50:1. In the meantime, out of several 1,000 samples taken in Turkey, the Turks had an average ratio of about 42.1, India was at 39, and everyone else performed much better. The countries in our region are not significantly better off, but they are better. In Slovenia, the current ratio stands at 25.1, in Croatia it is 35.1, but right here in our country it is 50.1. That is why we actually started a project with the goal of changing the health structure of the population in the Balkans in the long term, because these are factors that can definitely be influenced.
Yes, you explained everything well like this, but now let me ask you, what are the reasons why we are doing so poorly, and what is the solution?
That's an excellent question, not to say thank you for asking. All right. There are numerous causes: poor air quality, poor soil quality across the vast majority of the territory, and along with all that, poor food quality and poor water quality. We can say I have also spoken with some speleologists who conducted research in the eastern part of Serbia, who came and did studies in the caves, and they concluded that practically all our underground waters there are polluted. So, we are now forced to confront the severe consequences of environmental destruction, primarily due to large-scale international corporations operating in eastern Serbia, which have heavily contaminated and polluted both the Bor and Zaječar districts. They come in and, in a single day, completely obliterate and blow up an entire mountain with dynamite. Then we also have that vast northern region of the territory where certain processes are taking place again, which are extremely detrimental and far from being healthy for our country. And then we have the significant and looming potential danger from those who are willing to pollute, who have the idea that now even the western part of Serbia could be contaminated through lithium mining. To add to that, we don't know what's being done. We are left to simply wonder and speculate about what's happening at the Vinča landfill and at other landfills. And we don't know, nor is there any proper legal oversight as to what kind of hazardous waste is being imported from abroad and stored here. And when we add that more than 25 years have passed since the bombing, that we are still experiencing the consequences of that bombing in which banned cluster bombs and other weapons with nuclear radioactive payloads were used, we can conclude that these results are, unfortunately, not surprising.
Yes. What is the effective solution to such a challenging situation here? And exactly how much time does it take to reach at least some kind of balance?
Well, now when we talk about the healthiest people who have nothing to change, each of them tries, and all of us should truly try to spend as much time as possible, especially those of us living in the busy city, somewhere deep in the woods or high in the mountains, to go at least once or twice every single week for a few hours, to walk in a much cleaner and more refreshing natural environment. These first people we measured, since they follow an exceptionally optimal diet, which also means they actively seek out high-quality organic food. They don't just buy anything at standard hypermarkets, but really make a significant effort to source the best quality food available. They can effectively solve that specific problem with the help of targeted high-quality supplementation. What we originally started and initiated in our project, and the primary reason we performed these specific clinical tests, is because we are a Scandinavian company that was the first in the world to launch what the English call test-based nutrition. It actually sounds much better and more professional in English than in Serbian. But what this essentially and fundamentally means is nutrition and supplementation based on testing and carefully assessing one's unique condition. There are various nutritional dietary supplements, and as a company, we provide one of those supplements that can significantly improve this delicate internal balance and help us achieve equilibrium. Generally speaking, the vast majority of us are not quite ready to leave Serbia, and most of us simply cannot spend 2 or 3 days every week somewhere high in the mountains, in nature, or in the forest, where the air is exceptionally clean and refreshing. In our current world, we often find that we can't really choose our food as freely as we might think. One of the most important solutions to this problem is for us as a collective society to return a bit more to the practice of preserving nature and to actively fight against certain persistent attempts at financial influence and the overwhelming power of those corporate entities who are simply not interested in protecting our natural environment for future generations. So these movements, all those people who are actively fighting against lithium mining, the You Will Not Mine Lithium movement, we can support those activities. The fight against mini hydropower plants and everything else, all those things that pollute, is absolutely vital for our future. Not all of us can influence that directly, but we can support protests and we can participate in protests. What we ourselves can do on our local level is to become significantly more mindful of our environment. We should be more mindful of our daily diet, dedicate more time to being in nature, and incorporate high-quality supplements. But as a society, we also truly need to be more mindful.
Yes, so you said you put the emphasis on the environment. I would say so here we're talking about the company Zinzino. Within your company, you also conduct a test. Is that correct?
We do not conduct the test within our company. Instead, we send blood samples to one of these 4 laboratories. It would be a conflict of interest if we performed the test ourselves. Therefore, we enable people with the approval of the Ministry of Health to have their blood samples sent abroad through a laboratory so they can be analyzed where it is possible. This can certainly be done. What Zinzino as a company does is produce one of the supplements that has been shown to be absorbable at the cellular level. When we talk about supplements, it's very important for us to be a socially responsible company as manufacturers. I'm also speaking as someone who has been a consultant for numerous international and domestic pharmaceutical companies. If I'm talking to a friend who owns a supplement factory and I ask him, okay, which of your products is the best? Which one has shown the best results? I usually get the answer, well, look, if we want to make a product that's a bit higher quality, we use better ingredients, set a higher price, and it sells. And if we want a product that is accessible to the wider general public, we buy slightly cheaper ingredients, add what's popular or what we know some research shows is beneficial for health, put that into the product, and everything we produce is successfully sold. But which specific part of that actually works best? We don't know. We can only assume that something works. Why? Because when someone takes something and starts making a supplement, for example, isolates vitamin C, not to mention producing it in a lab, but just isolating it. Whether we take vitamin C from rose hips or from acerola or from some other good source of vitamin C. If it doesn't have bioflavonoids, it will be absorbed over 20 times worse. Vitamin D absorbs best with fat like olive oil. The omega-3 fatty acids we're talking about absolutely require the presence of polyphenols. So if we have vitamin C without bioflavonoids, if we have vitamin D that isn't in an oil-based environment, or if we have omega-3s without polyphenols, then those nutrients are simply not absorbed by the body in sufficient amounts. And now when we talk about omega-3s, if there are no polyphenols, then we do not have nearly enough of them to be effective. Can we actually get them through our regular diet? Unfortunately, we can't, and it turns out that even Norwegians can't either. Why? People most often associate omega-3 with fish and fish oil. They told us, even when I was young, to use it for its omega-3 fatty acids. But fish are not the primary source of omega-3. In that case, the primary source is actually sea algae. The fish that eat sea algae rich in omega-3 are the ones we might be able to use because they also absorb polyphenols from the algae. If we now go to Oslo or to Iceland, to Reykjavik, and buy from a fisherman who has just caught sardines, mackerel, or anchovies and eat that, we get all three. But even Scandinavians don't do that anymore. They go to the market on Saturday or Sunday, buy 5 to 6 kilograms of fish, put it in the freezer, and polyphenols are very unstable, so we don't have them anymore. On the other hand, avocado is also a good source of omega-3. We go to Argentina, pick an avocado straight from the tree, it's fantastic. However, by the time that avocado reaches Europe or Serbia, it no longer contains polyphenols. So when we talk about supplements, it's essential that the supplement contains polyphenols, and that's now a serious science. Currently, we know of 2 companies that produce a product with omega-3 and polyphenols. We are one of those 2 companies, but what is most important is that tests are done first. We also produce various other supplements. In those cases as well, we first conduct biochemical analyses and then we recommend specific supplements. That's simply our way of doing business, and we believe it will be dominant in 30 or 40 years.